So essentially, AI is a kind of a rebranded term, so it becomes a little bit confusing. AI used to have a very specific meaning of artificial intelligence, of like the movie AI, right?
The Spielberg kid.
Yeah, the little kid talking to you.
Or iRobot.
Yeah, or iRobot,
Will Smith.
Classic Asimov sort of stories, of these reasoning beings which were created artificially, I guess.
What's an Asimov story? I know what that is.
Oh, so iRobot was based. iRobot was based off a few books by Isaac Asimov, and he coined the three laws of robotics, which are very famous. Eventually, he added a fourth because started to believe that the three weren't sufficient. And I won't spoil the story, but definitely should read some of those stories. If you haven't. Right. So AI used to mean this sort of creating intelligence, essentially.
Right.
It's in the name, and I don't know where it changed, but essentially there's a huge resurgence in neural network research. So neural networks were this model for making a classification that you would want. So say you have a picture and you ask the question, is there a cat in the picture? A neural network was a type of approach of telling you if there's a cat in the picture. Very famously, there was a TV show which made an app to classify if it's a hot dog or not. So that's another case of like a neural network. And for the longest time, neural networks were one of the tools you had in your toolbox. There were neural networks, there were support vector machines, and they sort of had a lot of excitement around them. The interesting thing about them is they have a biological basis. They're sort of trying to emulate the way the brain works in terms of you have these little neurons, and these neurons are interacting in some way, and if sort of enough of the neurons in your brain fire, then you feel something or you decide something, or at least that's kind of the loose logic.
Right. Yeah. So these neural networks you're talking about are all digital, are on the computer. Yeah.
So they actually were called artificial neural networks for the longest time, ANNs. And just to differentiate them.
When?
So they
80s?
Started around I would say 1960s with Rosenblatt, and then there's some work, I think they call them multi-layer perceptrons. They like to change the name just to confuse you every so often.
It's basically rebranding.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think artificial neural network is a pretty good name because it really, it's, we base this model in biology, but it's not biological. So as an example, in biology, you have action potentials which go between neurons, and so whether an action potential goes or not, that's the neuron firing. But also the amount of time it takes is also a factor, and we don't consider any of those factors in artificial neural networks. So they are certainly a simplification.
All right. So a lot of this stuff is just going over my head. Can you speak plain English?
So essentially we had this artificial neural network model. I say we. This clearly predates me, and they were there's a lot of excitement around them, and then this excitement receded, in part because someone showed that there was this really simple toy problem that they couldn't solve, that they just fundamentally couldn't solve, and there were caveats to it, but most people didn't pick up on the caveats, and I think the combination of a lot of excitement, like we're emulating the brain, and then realizing there's this really basic problem that they can't solve, had people sort of pull away from that field. And then very recently, 2010, 2012, some researchers combined, oddly enough, graphics cards with these neural networks because they realized that graphics cards for computers are being built to make these amazing displays, and it turns out the way that they do that computation is very similar to the way the neural network does the computation.
Okay.
And I don't think it was obvious to many people before, but essentially it turned out that the key to get these neural networks to work were some device that could operate quickly, and a lot of data.
So pretty much the hardware at that time wasn't able to support this kind of development.
And the data, we didn't have anywhere near as much data back then.
And now with the GPUs that we have, which is like used to I know with GPUs because it's used to process video games or like movies or whatnot, and that's what is now powering the ANNs.
Absolutely, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So there's sort of these three factors which came together very nicely, and there's a very famous sort of task that computer science researchers, computer vision researchers focused on, and the first application of the model was, had 50% lower error or something astronomical. Like people were not doing well at this task, and then out of nowhere, this team comes out with this neural network approach, and it's incredible.
Right.
And it's really just taken off since then. And so I think the combination, now I'm realizing this is a very roundabout answer to your question, but I think it was the combination of the fact that we use artificial neural networks to sort of do some really amazing things which feel like only humans can do. I think people have said, oh, well, this looks like artificial intelligence. So now what's sort of happened is now machine learning and artificial intelligence are kind of interchangeable, and people who are really focused on that sort of iRobot, lifelike robot, they call that general artificial intelligence.
Okay, that's called and what's the other one then? General artificial intelligence, and the other one is?
And just artificial intelligence. So if we're talking artificial intelligence, we're just talking about sort of teaching a machine to do something.
Right.
But if we're talking